The voicemail was still playing when my knees gave out. I sat down right there on the sidewalk, in front of the building that used to have my name on the lease, and I listened to my daughter's voice telling me she had already spoken to the property manager, that my access card had been deactivated, and that I should not try to contact her or her husband until she reached out first. Her voice was calm, measured, like she was leaving a message for a stranger about a scheduling conflict. I played it again, and then a third time. Not because I didn't understand the words. I understood them perfectly. I played it again because some part of me kept waiting for the part where she laughed and said she was joking. That part never came. Let me go back to the beginning, because if I just start here, you'll think this is a story about a bad daughter. It isn't, or maybe it is, but it's also a story about me, and the choices I made, and what happens when you love someone so completely that you forget to love yourself at the same time. My name is Claire. I'm 41 years old. For the past 19 years, I ran a bakery called Hollow Creek Kitchen out of a small commercial space in Asheville, North Carolina. I built it from nothing, and I mean nothing. When I opened the doors for the first time, I had a used stand mixer, 2 sheet pans, a folding table I borrowed from my neighbor, and about $600 left in my checking account. My daughter was 3 years old. Her father had been gone for 8 months by then, and the only thing I knew for certain was that I was not going to raise her the way I had been raised, always one missed payment away from losing everything, always depending on someone else to decide whether we ate that week. So I baked. I baked at 4 in the morning, and I baked at midnight. I sold at the farmer's market on Saturdays, and I delivered to 2 local coffee shops on weekday mornings, and I catered baby showers and retirement parties on the weekends. My daughter grew up doing homework at the corner table of that bakery. She knew how to frost a cake before she knew how to ride a bike. When she was 12, she started coming in on Saturdays to help with the counter, and I thought I really believed that meant she loved the place the way I did, that she understood what it cost. By the time she was in her late 20s, Hollow Creek Kitchen had a waiting list for custom orders. We had 4 employees. I owned the equipment outright, and I had built up a healthy reserve account. I also owned the building we operated out of. I had bought it 12 years earlier from the original landlord when he retired, and it was the single proudest moment of my adult life. Signing those papers. My name on the deed. My name on the door. Mine. My daughter was 28 when she married her husband. I liked him well enough at first. He was charming in that way that asks something of you without ever saying what, and he had a lot of ideas. That should have been my first warning. People with a lot of ideas and no patience for the slow parts are dangerous. But my daughter loved him, and she was happy, and I wanted that for her more than I wanted to be right about anything. The problems started small enough that I talked myself out of seeing them. My son-in-law started coming into the bakery more, asking questions about the financials, the lease structure, the reserve account. He framed it as interest, as wanting to understand what my daughter might one day inherit. I was flattered. I thought it meant he was serious, responsible, planning ahead. He suggested, gently at first, that the bakery was under-leveraged. That word should have sent me running. Instead, I nodded and asked what he meant. He meant that I owned a building outright and a profitable business, and I wasn't using either one to build more wealth. He had a plan. He and my daughter wanted to open a second location, a bigger, more modern space downtown. They had already done the research, found the space, talked to a contractor. All they needed was capital. I said I would think about it. He came back 2 weeks later with a folder. A real folder, with printed projections and market analysis and a proposed repayment schedule. My daughter sat next to him at my kitchen table and looked at me with those eyes she had, the ones that had always made me want to give her the world on a plate, and she said, "Mom, we just want to build something together. Like you built this." I signed the paperwork 3 weeks later. What I signed was not, as I understood it, a simple loan agreement. I had not had a lawyer review it. My son-in-law had explained it as a transfer of a minority ownership stake in the building, enough to secure a bank loan for the expansion, and I had taken him at his word about the terms because he was family and because I was tired and because I trusted my daughter. What I actually signed transferred majority control of the building to a new LLC, with both of their names on it. I didn't know that yet. I wouldn't know it for another 4 months. The expansion project began. There were cost overruns immediately. which my son-in-law explained away with the confidence of someone who has never had to personally feel the weight of money running out. I covered the first overrun from the reserve account. Then the second. I told myself it was an investment. I told myself it would stabilize once the new location opened. My daughter and I still talked every day during this period. Or I thought we did. Looking back, I realized she was managing me, keeping the conversations light and warm, and moving fast enough that I never sat in any one moment long enough to ask hard questions. She was good at it. She had learned from me, I think. I had spent her whole childhood making hard things look easy so she wouldn't worry. The new location opened in March. It was beautiful. I stood at the ribbon cutting and cried, and I thought the tears were pride. 3 weeks after the opening, my son-in-law came to see me alone. He said they needed to restructure. He said the loan terms required them to consolidate the asset, which meant the original building, my building, the one with my name on the door, needed to be transferred fully into the LLC to satisfy the lender. He had the paperwork ready. He said it was temporary, that once the new location hit 6 months of revenue, they would restructure again and transfer it back. I asked why my daughter wasn't there. He said she was at the new location. He said she had asked him to handle it because paperwork stressed her out. I signed. I know. You're sitting there right now wanting to reach through the screen and shake me. Believe me, I have done it myself, in every mirror I've walked past since then. But I want you to understand something. When you have spent 19 years building something alone, and the person you built it for is finally standing next to you asking to be part of it, every instinct you have says yes. It says, of course. It says this is what all of it was for. That instinct is the most dangerous thing I own. 2 weeks after I signed the second set of documents, I drove to the bakery on a Thursday morning, the way I had driven there thousands of times before. It was 6:15. The streetlights were still on. I had a tray of test pastries in the passenger seat for a wedding consult I had scheduled at 8. My key card didn't work. I tried it twice. Then I tried the physical key I had carried for 12 years. The lock had been changed. Through the front window, I could see that someone had rearranged the counter display, the frames I had chosen, the chalkboard menu I had written myself, all of it replaced with something cleaner and more modern, and completely foreign to me. I called my daughter. She didn't answer. I called again. And again. I texted. I stood on that sidewalk for 40 minutes while the sky got light around me, and the town woke up and people walked past me not knowing that I was watching my life from the outside. When she finally called back, she didn't apologize. She said she had been meaning to talk to me. She said the restructuring had gone differently than planned. She said her husband had advised them that for liability reasons, it was cleaner if I was no longer listed as an operator on the business licenses. I said, "Honey, I own the building." There was a pause that I will hear for the rest of my life. And then she said, "Mom, you don't. Not anymore. I'm sorry. I think you need to talk to a lawyer." Then she hung up. That was the moment. That was the moment I sat down on the sidewalk and listened to the voicemail. I spent the first night at a friend's house. She was the kind of friend who asks no questions and puts clean towels on the guest bed. And I have never been more grateful for any person in my life. I cried until I couldn't, and then I lay on top of the covers in the dark and stared at the ceiling and tried to understand how I had gotten from the farmer's market with $600 and a borrowed folding table to sitting in someone else's guest room, at 41 years old with nothing. I called a lawyer the next morning. What she told me over the next 2 days rearranged everything I thought I understood about what had happened. The documents I had signed were legal. My son-in-law had not forged anything. Every signature was mine. But the structure of what I had signed was not what he had described it to be, and more importantly, he had made representations to me about the purpose and the temporary nature of the transfer that were demonstrably false, and I had emails and text messages that documented some of those representations. It was not a slam dunk, my lawyer told me. These cases were hard to win. But it was not nothing. She also found something else. In the process of reviewing the LLC documents, she discovered that my son-in-law had used the building as collateral for a second loan, one that had nothing to do with the bakery expansion. That loan had gone to fund a separate business venture he had never mentioned to me, and that venture was already in default. My building was collateral on a defaulted loan. I sat in that lawyer's office and I felt something shift inside me. I have tried to describe this feeling many times since then, and the closest I can get is this. It was the feeling of something that had been heavy and soft becoming hard. Not angry, exactly. Not the hot kind of anger that burns itself out. The cold kind. The kind that is patient. I went back to my friend's house and I made a list. I had no immediate income. I had no access to the business accounts. I had my car, my personal checking account with a modest amount in it, my professional reputation, and 19 years of relationships in this town. I started making calls. The first person I called was the woman who had supplied my flour for a decade. She had known me since before my daughter could tie her shoes. I told her what had happened. Plainly, without drama. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "What do you need?" I needed a commercial kitchen I could use. She knew someone. Within 2 weeks, I was renting time in a shared commercial kitchen space 3 mornings a week and filling orders under my own name, not Hollow Creek Kitchen, just Claire, the way I had started. I emailed every client I had ever had a personal relationship with and I told them I had gone independent and I was taking orders. I did not explain why. I did not say anything about my daughter. The response was immediate. People who had ordered cakes from me for 15 years did not care whose LLC I was operating under. They cared that I answered the phone and that my croissants were the best they had ever had. I was not thriving, but I was not drowning. 3 months after I lost the bakery, my lawyer called me with news. The bank that held the defaulted loan, the one my son-in-law had taken out using my building as collateral, had initiated foreclosure proceedings. This was bad for him. It was also, unexpectedly, the opening we needed. Because in the course of the bank's review, a loan officer named Thomas had flagged something. When my son-in-law had applied for the second loan, he had included documentation representing me as a co-applicant. He had used a copy of my signature from the original LLC documents and applied it to the loan application without my knowledge or consent. That was not a civil matter. That was fraud. Thomas called me directly. He had found my number through the original business records. He was careful and professional about it, but he made sure I understood what he had found, and that the bank's legal team would be moving forward with a referral to the district attorney's office. He wanted to make sure I was aware, and that I had representation. I thanked him. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the shared kitchen space and I thanked him, and I hung up and I sat there for a long time. I want to tell you that what I felt in that moment was triumph. Clean, uncomplicated triumph. But it wasn't. What I felt was grief, and I think that's important to say, because if you have ever been betrayed by someone you loved completely, you know that justice doesn't feel the way movies make it look. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like confirmation of the thing you already knew and didn't want to be true. My daughter had known about the second loan. That came out later. She had not known he forged my signature, or at least that's what she told the investigators, and I have chosen to believe her because I need to believe something. But she had known the building was being used as collateral for something she hadn't told me about, and she had let it happen, and she had stood in my kitchen and looked at me with those eyes and said, "We just want to build something together. Like you built this." The legal process was slow and unglamorous. There is no dramatic courtroom scene in my story. There are depositions and document requests and waiting. There is a lot of waiting. My son-in-law's attorney negotiated. My daughter's attorney communicated with my attorney in emails I never saw. The DA's office moved forward with fraud charges. Eventually, and I want to be honest about the fact that eventually covered about 8 months of my life, there was a settlement. The LLC was dissolved. The building, which the bank had moved to foreclose on, was liquidated as part of resolving the defaulted loan, but because of the documented fraud, I was named as a creditor with priority claim on the proceeds. I did not get the building back. I got the majority of its assessed value. It was not everything. It was not what I had built, but it was enough. My son-in-law entered a plea agreement on the fraud charges. My daughter and I did not speak for 11 months. She called me on a Tuesday in February, close to a year after the voicemail. I let it ring. Then I called her back. She was crying before I said hello. She said she was sorry. She said it the way people say things when they have had a lot of time to sit with something and they finally understand the weight of it. She said she didn't know what he had done with the signature. She said she should have protected me. She said she had been so dazzled by the idea of building something that she forgot what it cost me to build the thing we were supposed to be building together. I don't know if I have forgiven her. I'm not sure forgiveness is a switch that flips, or a door that opens cleanly. What I know is that I told her I heard her, and I meant it, and that was enough for that day. We are in something now that doesn't have a clean name. It is not what we had before. It is also not nothing. She calls on Sundays sometimes. I answer about half the time. We are both figuring out who we are to each other when the love is real, but the trust is still rebuilding, one Sunday at a time. What I know now that I didn't know before. I know that you should never, under any circumstances, sign a document about your property without a lawyer you hired yourself looking at it first. Not a lawyer someone else recommended. Not a friend of the family who happens to practice real estate law. A lawyer whose only job is to work for you. I learned this 11 months too late, and it cost me the building I spent 12 years paying for. I know that love is not a substitute for clarity. I loved my daughter, and I blurred things I should have seen because I didn't want to see them. That blurring wasn't generosity. It was avoidance, and it left us both in a worse place than if I had simply asked the hard questions at the beginning. I know that what I built once, I can build again. That's not a comfort I could access in the beginning when you're sitting on a sidewalk at 6 in the morning with a tray of pastries and a key that doesn't work. You can start over is not a helpful thing to hear. But from here, from the other side of it, I know it's true. I am operating out of a small commercial space I signed a lease on 6 months ago. My name is on the door. My name on the lease. Mine. I have 3 employees. I have a waiting list for custom orders. The flower supplier came to the soft opening with flowers. Thomas, the loan officer who called me from the bank, brought his wife. They ordered a custom cake for their anniversary. My daughter came. She stood in the doorway for a moment before she came inside. The way you stand at the edge of something when you're not sure you're allowed in. I waved her through. She ordered a croissant and she ate it at the corner table, and she didn't say much, and neither did I. And it was the most honest thing that had passed between us in 2 years. There is a version of this story where I end by telling you I'm healed and whole and grateful for everything that happened because it made me stronger. I'm not going to tell you that version, because it isn't true. What happened to me was a betrayal. It hurt in ways I am still discovering. In the corners of myself I reach for when I'm tired or scared and find unexpectedly empty. But I am also still here. That used to be the smallest possible thing I could say about myself. Lately, I have started to understand that it might be the largest. Before all of this, if you had asked me who I was, I would have said, I am the woman who runs Hollow Creek Kitchen. I am my daughter's mother. I am what I built. I know now that I was all of those things, but I was also something that existed before all of them and will exist after. I didn't know that woman very well. I am getting to know her now. She gets up at 5 in the morning. She drives to a building with her name on the door. She puts her key in the lock, and it turns, and she goes inside. That is enough. For today, that is exactly enough.